I want to welcome you back to the D-Lo Show. I am your host, Ryan D-Lo Delosier, and today we are going to go back into the Idaho 4 case. And while the criminal case against Brian Kohberger has reached its conclusion with its 4 life sentences, the civil courtrooms are just beginning to heat up. So today we're going to look at some of the developments that's happened over the past few weeks. But I want to look at a few. I want to kind of get you up to date in case you're new to this, you're not really sure what's going on. So Brian Kohberger, he's a 31-year-old American, former criminology graduate student who is currently serving 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the 2022 murders of 4 University of Idaho students. On July 2nd of 2025, Kohberger pleaded guilty to these 4 counts of first-degree murder and also 1 count of felony burglary. By pleading guilty, he avoided a potential death sentence and possibly death by a firing squad. On July 23rd, 2025, so, looking several days later after he pleaded, a couple weeks later after he pleaded guilty, the Ada County judge sentenced him to 4 fixed life terms to run consecutively, plus 10 years for the burglary. He waived all of his rights to appeal as part of the plea agreement. Currently, he is located at Idaho State Correctional Facility, and the Idaho State Correctional Center is a maximum security facility south of Boise, where he is reportedly housed in J Block. In the early hours, so going back to the murders, in the early hours of November 13th of 2022, Kohberger broke into an off-campus rental home in Moscow, Idaho, and fatally stabbed 4 students, Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. At the time of the murders, Kohberger was a PhD student and teaching assistant in criminology at Washington State University in nearby Pullman, Washington, just 8 miles away from Idaho where the murder happened. Key evidence linking him to the scene included a K-bar knife sheath that was left near one of the victims, which contained his DNA, single-source DNA, under the button snap that showed that it was his. Investigators also used cell phone tower pings and surveillance footage of his white Hyundai Elantra to track his movements. Following his arrest, former peers and faculty at WSU described him as, quote, creepy and domineering, with reports of rude and belittling behavior towards women. In his pre-arrest behavior, like after the murders happened but before he was arrested, reports indicated he became increasingly disheveled and stopped bringing his phone to class after the murders. His motive? Well, despite his guilty plea, Kohberger has never provided a public motive for the killings, and investigators have not established a definitive prior connection between him and the victims. At Kohberger's sentencing on July 23, 2025, victims' families delivered intense statements while investigators detailed the forensic trail that led to his arrest. Investigators built a case centered on forensic genetics, digital footprints, and physical surveillance. Starting with the knife sheath. It was a K-bar sheath. It was found next to Madison Mogan's body and contained a single source of male DNA on the button snap. Then we go to the genetic genealogy. The FBI used what is known as IgG, Investigative Genetic Genealogy, to link the sheath's DNA to Kohberger's father by testing trash recovered from the family's Pennsylvania home. Then there's that white Elantra. Surveillance footage captured a white Hyundai Elantra circling the victim's neighborhood 4 times between 11:29 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. on the night of the murders. And then there were those cell phone pings. Phone records showed Kohberger's device was near the victim's home at least 12 times in the months prior to the attack. Yes, this shows that he was there in the area at least 12 times prior to the night of November 13th, 2022. On that night of the murders, his phone was turned off, or It was in airplane mode between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. Just amazing how specific this detail can be. They know exactly what time that he put that phone either off or in airplane mode because it was no longer connecting to cell phone towers. The families and surviving roommates confronted Kohberger directly during the hearing, during the victim and when they provided their victim impact statements. Olivia Gonsalves, Kaylee's sister, she called him a pathetic, hypochondriac loser, and noted that the scariest thing about him was how painfully average he turned out to be. She famously told him, "If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, Kaylee would have kicked your effing ass." Steve Gonsalves, Kaylee's father, mentioned this. He turned his lectern to face Kohberger. Instead of just facing the judge or facing the people, he turned his lectern to face him directly, calling him a complete joke and mocking his stupid mistakes, like leaving the knife sheath behind. Dylan Mortensen was one of the surviving roommates, and she spoke publicly for the first time during the victim impact statements, describing her survivor's guilt and stating that Kohberger shattered me in places I didn't know could break. Kim Kernodle was Xana's aunt. In a rare moment of absolution, she offered Kohberger forgiveness, stating she could no longer live with hate in her heart. And then there was Kohberger's response. His response, well, when he was asked if he wanted to provide anything, Kohberger simply stated, "I respectfully decline." The surviving roommate accounts, there's two surviving roommates. One of them, Dylan Mortensen, spoke in the victim impact statements, and the other one was Bethany Funk. They provided investigators with chilling details of the night of the murders. So there's the shadowy figure. Mortensen, also known as DM in many of the documents, was awakened around 4 a.m. by a noise on the third floor, and she later opened her door and saw a masked man with, and I quote, bushy eyebrows, walking toward the sliding glass door. She described herself as being in a frozen shock phase before locking her bedroom door. And then there were panic text messages between the two girls. Records unsealed in March of 2025 revealed that between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., Mortensen and Funk exchanged panic text. At 4:22, Mortensen texted, "No one is answering," to which Funk replied, "Yeah, dude, WTF." Mortensen later texted, "I'm freaking out," after seeing the intruder. Then there was an 8-hour delay, which went along with this as well, too. A 911 call was not placed until 11:58 a.m. Mortensen explained during sentencing that she initially thought the sounds were routine, thinking it was her roommate playing with a dog, playing with the dog Murphy, and then that her delay in calling was due to being tired, in and out of it, and also sheer terror. And then there was the plea deal and the legal controversies that went along with that. So in Kohberger's July 2025 guilty plea, it shocked the public and divided the victim's family. So leading up to this, Kohberger was eager to be exonerated. Like, that was one of his first lines that he had said. He was looking forward to being exonerated in this case. The terms of the deal were, though, that Kohberger pleaded guilty to 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. In exchange, the state dropped the death penalty, and Kohberger waived all rights to appeal his 4 consecutive life sentences. The motivations for the plea included this. It was avoiding execution for Kohberger. Idaho recently authorized the firing squad as an execution method, which reportedly influenced the defense's decision to seek a deal. Then there was the forensic evidence. So the defense faced overwhelming evidence, including the DNA on the knife sheath and cell tower data. By pleading guilty, Kohberger bypassed a trial where this evidence would have been presented in graphic detail. There was family division that went along with this, so there was some that were opposed and some that were supportive of the 4 families involved. I mean, you're probably not going to get all of them on the same page. The Gonsalves family slammed the deal, calling it hurried and secretive. Steve Gonsalves described it as a deal with the devil that cheated them out of a public trial and potential death sentence. In support of it were Maddie Mogan and Ethan Chapin. They supported the agreement, their families, stating it provided closure and then separated them from the years of traumatic appeals. The history going along with this, so just more of what's going on with Kohberger, and so what he leading up to this, what did he do? What kind of led to this? Well, he was a high-achieving student whose studies were centered on psychology of criminal behavior. He has degrees in Associate of Psychology. He got that from Northampton Community College, and associate's degree in 2018. And then he got a bachelor's in psychology in 2020 and a master's in criminal justice in 2022 from DeSales University. He was also a PhD candidate at the time of the murders. He was in his first semester at WSU, Washington State University. Going along with this, so at WSU, his research focused on how offenders make their decisions, and how the emotions influence criminal acts. And in his criminal psychology studies, he studied under renowned criminologist Catherine Ramsland, taking courses like Dangerous Minds, The Psychology of Antisocial Behavior. And then he wrote a burglary paper where Kohberger authored this paper on burglary, specifically exploring the concept of sexual burglars. Some of the red flags that came out prior to his, he was indeed terminated. So he was fired from his teaching assistant job on December 19th of 2022. It was just days before his arrest. And following these were warnings that he had received. There was a lot of information that WSU had gathered, which was sexist behavior and harsh grading that Kohberger was showing. And then his classroom presence, peers described him as trying to appear as the smartest person in the room and engaging in hours-long verbal sparring with professors. How did they catch him? Well, some of the things that they did. So the digital evidence created a timeline of guilt that pinpointed his location before, during, and after the murders. So pre-murder surveillance, the cell tower data showed his phone pinged near the victim's home at least 12 times, as I mentioned earlier, between June and November of 2022. So he'd only been in this area, like where the area of Moscow Pullman is at right there. Again, it's kind of a tight-knit community. There's two colleges there that are basically 10 minutes apart from each other. He had only just arrived there in June of 2022, maybe even after that. And in November was when the murders happened. Okay, he got fired from his job, his teaching assistant job in late December. So it didn't take him long to really ruffle some feathers in that area, if you know what I mean. For WSU, they start their schooling, their semester in August. And he didn't even really make it through one semester there. And there was a dark period where on the night of the murders on November 13th, Kohberger's phone stopped connecting to the network at 2:47 a.m. and did not reappear until 4:48 a.m. And at the time, he was south of Moscow, in a move that investigators believe was a deliberate attempt to avoid tracking. And then his when he returned, actually, the murders after they happened on the 13th, in the late night, early morning, he actually returned to the killing. He returned to the house. So at 9:12 a.m., roughly 5 hours after the killing that happened at 4 a.m., his phone pinged near the King Road residence for approximately 10 minutes before returning back to Pullman, where he lived. They identified the vehicle as he was going through. So through there was surveillance footage from police worn body cam from him in a traffic stop, which linked his white 2015 Hyundai Elantra to his phone number because of a routine traffic stop in August of 2022, where he provided his contact info. And then after the murders, when he was back in Pennsylvania, after the murders, Kohberger reportedly meticulously scrubbed his car and was seen wearing surgical gloves while putting trash into a neighbor's bin. Just so many things wrong with that one. Putting trash into the neighbor's garbage bin and wearing surgical gloves. So think about how much that screams guilt right here. He had panicked digital activity as well. So following news that police were looking for a white Elantra, his phone records showed searches for terms like wiretap and psychopaths paranoid, and he began shopping online for a new car. The unsealed 2025 records provided a minute-by-minute look at how investigators used advanced DNA science and internal communications from within the house to build their case. And then let's go back to that IgG. So the investigative genetic genealogy, this was indeed the silver bullet that allowed police to identify Kohberger when his DNA wasn't in any criminal database. So the process that goes along with this is that the FBI used, they take the DNA profile from the knife sheath, so it was on there, that single source DNA that was under the button snap, they uploaded it to public genealogical sites such as GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. And they found distant cousins, which allowed genealogists to build a massive family tree. The tree eventually narrowed down to the Kohberger family in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And then what happened is the family then went and they started pulling trash from this house right there as they were there. So to confirm the lead that they were going with right here, Pennsylvania police went and discovered trash from Kohberger's family home. So when they do this, when they go and go through and look through the trash, they can do this because it's discarded information. In fact, during the trial, Kohberger tried to get the knife sheath thrown out because it was because it was something there that they tried to get it thrown out, but it was the knife sheath because it was left behind. It was discarded. No one knew whose it was, and the only reason that Kohberger could try to get it pulled out is he was like, "Hey, that's my knife sheath," but then he didn't want to say that either because that would have implicated him in the crime because there's a knife sheath under under Matty Mogan, and so that wouldn't have worked out well for him. So again, if you discard your trash, you've thrown it out, you've rolled it out to the street, it is now available as a public domain for people to go and take a look at. So they found DNA belonging to Michael Kohberger when they did this trash pull, though. So that who happens to be Brian's father. Say they didn't find DNA associated with Brian Kohberger because he's wearing gloves and throwing his trash in baggies and trying to hide all of his DNA. And plus, he's a PhD student. He's probably pretty good at hiding his DNA and not getting caught at this stuff. So they found DNA that belonged to his dad instead. And there was a statistical certainty that went along with that. So testing showed that the DNA on the knife sheath was 99 point, and let me get all these nines in here, 9998% likely. So 99, basically, there was it was very unlikely that it was not. I forget what it was like some octillion, one in octillion. Basically, of all the people who have ever been born in the world, the chance of it that like there might be one other person that could possibly share that DNA, but in that have ever existed, I don't even know if that's even possible. Octillion's a pretty big number. So testing showed that the DNA from the knife sheath was 99.9998% likely to be from the biological son of the man who touched the trash, pointing directly to Brian. And the surviving roommates, there was more things that were unsealed for them. So for years, the public worried about what happened inside the house during the 8-hour gap before the 911 call. So unsealed transcripts revealed a series of panic messages between DM, Dylan Mortensen, and Bethany Funk, BF. So at 4:02, DM texted BF, "Who was on the first floor? Did you hear that?" And then at 4:04, DM sent a text like, "I think Xana is crying." At 4:17, following the sighting of the masked figure, DM messaged BF, "Someone is in the house. I'm locking my door." And then at 4:21, BF replied, "I heard a thud. Is everyone okay?" And then there was the silence. After these messages, there was no further communication for hours. During sentencing, it was revealed that DM had fallen into a dissociative state due to the extreme trauma, while BF eventually fell back asleep, believing the noises were just part of the party house antics that were going on right there. It was a busy house. 6 college kids living in there. This was a Saturday night. There happened to have been a football game that day. The kids were up late partying. I mean, the two of the girls had were killed by Brian Kohberger. 2 of them had gone out to the bars. They were 21 years old. The other 2, Xana and Ethan, were 20, but they had gone to a frat party. So, 20-year-olds aren't supposed to drink, but they went to a frat party and they came back and passed out as well too. So, these are college kids doing college things on a Saturday night after a football game in Idaho. That's just kind of what goes on. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but it is a lot of kids do go and party. So the discovery at 11:45 a.m., the friends arrived at the house, and one friend used DM's phone to call 911 after seeing one of the victims through a window describing an unconscious person. And then there was, with going back to Kohberger here, the investigators, they also interviewed Kohberger's WSU peers to understand his state of mind. And so there was a post-murder shift. After the 13th, Kohberger became chatty about the Idaho murders during criminology discussions, often asking classmates what they thought were the killer's mistakes. Visual changes, he reportedly stopped grooming himself and grew this patchy beard. And then he appeared to have bruises and scratches on his forearms in the weeks following the attack. So, which probably, this was a pretty gruesome scene, and I would imagine they do say that Xana, I've mentioned before that she got up and at least tried to fight back. So I would imagine even if you are attacking 4 people who are pretty much asleep, you're probably going to get some things. You're probably going to get some bruises and some scrapes and stuff like that while you're doing that. Search of Kohberger's apartment and subsequent cross-country drive provided the final physical links to the crime and his behavior immediately following the murders. In mid-December, Kohberger and his father drove the white Hyundai Elantra from Pullman, Washington to their family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And the FBI did tail them. They followed the vehicle for nearly the 2,500-mile trip. They purposefully coordinated with Indiana State Troopers to pull over Kohberger twice in 9 minutes on December 15th to get a closer look at his hands and face. And there were behavioral red flags that went along with this. So during the drive, Kohberger repeatedly became extremely hypervigilant. Upon arriving in Pennsylvania, he was observed by surveillance teams wearing surgical gloves multiple times, even inside his own home. And then there was the trash disposal, which I mentioned earlier. At 4 a.m. on the night of the arrest, Kohberger was seen taking the family's trash out and placing it in a neighbor's bin to avoid detection, which is how investigators ultimately secured the DNA match. And then there was evidence later around the same time. WSU police and FBI raided his Pullman apartment. So, he was in Pullman, but now he's in Albrightsville. He still had stuff in his Pullman apartment. So on December 30th of 2022, they recovered several items that suggested a fixation on the crime. They found, investigators, they seized a reddish-brown stained pillowcase and a mattress cover, though later testing was inconclusive regarding victim DNA. There was the missing K-bar knife, like it never showed up. So using the murders, it was never found. However, police recovered black nitrile gloves, several dark-colored clothing items, and a book with notes on crimes. A desktop computer, and multiple hard drives contained thousands of images of the victims, particularly Maddie Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves. Data showed he had been digitally stalking their social media profiles for months. And then in his WSU teaching assistant office, police found a hair strand, later identified as belonging to one of the victims, caught in the crevice of a desk drawer. So, criminally minded inventory that going along with this as well, too. Investigators also found a handwritten list in his apartment titled To-Do List, which included tasks like clean car, change oil, and trash. Forensic experts in 2025 sentencing argued that this was a post-murder checklist to destroy evidence. And then evidence presented during the July 2025 sentencing and in unsealed documents details Kohberger's digital obsession and his exhaustive yet ultimately failed attempt to hide physical evidence. Investigators also found that Kohberger had extensively monitored the victims online before the murders. He had direct messages they revealed that Kohberger repeatedly sent private messages to one of the female victims, which started in late October of 2022. He sent a series of, "Hey, how are you?" greetings, but never received a response. It remains unclear if the victim ever even saw the messages. And his now deleted Instagram account, which was followed by 3 of the female victims, Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Xana Kernodle, none of them followed him back. And then data recovered after his arrest showed he had thousands of images of victims on his device and had wiped many of them using specialized software just before his arrest. Prosecutors described his white Hyundai Elantra as a rolling crime scene that Kohberger attempted to scrub of all forensic traces. Following the murders, law enforcement observed Kohberger cleaning his car inside and out several times with extreme detail while he was under surveillance in Pennsylvania. And during that July 2025 hearing, the lead prosecutor, Bill Thompson, stated the car had been stripped so clean that it was essentially disassembled inside by the time it was seized. Investigators believe he may have covered the interior in plastic before the crime to prevent DNA transfer, a theory supported by his criminology background. And then despite these efforts, investigators were able to recover molecular evidence, including a hair strand linked to one of the victims. A judge ruled that Dylan Mortenson's eyewitness descriptions of the intruder as having bushy eyebrows was consistent and admissible, directly linking Kohberger's physical appearance to the scene. And then prosecutors also highlighted a selfie Kohberger allegedly took shortly after the murders while he was reportedly disposing of evidence. The final moments of 2025 sentencing and the items recovered from Kohberger's university office paint a picture of a man living a double life as a criminology student and a serial killer. While his apartment was the primary focus, investigators also searched his shared office in the Wilson Short Hall at Washington State University. The investigators recovered a single hair strand wedged deep in a desk drawer. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Madison Mogan. Prosecutors argue this was a trophy Kohberger kept from the crime scene. Several notebooks were seized containing detailed observations on the perfect crime and critiques of historical serial killers' mistakes. One note specifically analyzed the limitations of DNA recovery from smooth surfaces like leather. Search history on the WSU server indicated that through IT records showed Kohberger used the campus Wi-Fi to search things like local police scanner frequencies in Moscow, Idaho, in the weeks leading up to the murders. And then the judge, going back to Stephen Hippler. So on July 23rd of 2025, delivering a scathing address before officially sentencing Kohberger to 4 consecutive life terms. The judge described the attacks as an act of calculated, monstrous cruelty, and noted that Kohberger had used his education not to understand crime, but to perfect his own depravity. Judge Hippler spent 10 minutes reading the names and accomplishments of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee, stating that their lives outweighed Kohberger's existence by a factor of infinity. The judge explicitly ordered that Kohberger never be allowed to possess or view criminology materials while in prison, ensuring he could no longer study his own handiwork as a student. When given the chance to speak to the victims' families, Kohberger stood, looked at the judge, and said, "I respectfully decline." This refusal to offer an apology or explanation sparked an audible gasp in the courtroom and led the Gonsalves family to call him coward to the very end. So that brings us to where we are now. So as we go with this, we're going to look at this after the 3-year-long nightmare for the University of Idaho professor. This is Rebecca Scofield. This last week, a federal jury in Idaho awarded Scofield $10 million in a defamation lawsuit against psychic Ashley Gilliard. And so this is actually from the Idaho Statesman today's edition. This was on March 8th of 2026, and the title of this one is Professor Awarded $10 million in Defamation Case. A jury in Boise awarded $10 million in damages to a University of Idaho professor who sued a Texas woman for defamation over fabricated claims she made on social media that the academic was responsible for the Moscow College student murders. The jurors deliberated for about 2 hours before issuing their verdict, which awarded Professor Scofield 10 times what her attorneys had requested. Defendant Ashley Gilliard, 41 years old, of Houston, created videos she posted on TikTok in which she blamed Scofield for the murders. Gilliard said she used tarot cards to try to solve the homicides. Scofield testified that she developed severe anxiety, PTSD, and intense nerve pain as a direct result of the false accusations. Back in, as we mentioned earlier, Brian Kohberger pleaded guilty to the crime in June of 2025 and is now serving 4 life sentences in prison. So this was reported by Nicole Blanchard and Kevin Fixler and was published actually on February 27th. So there's an update for you on that side of it. So, for those who may have not followed that specific thread, Gilliard posted over 100 videos using tarot cards to claim that Professor Scofield orchestrated the murders. The jury's decision was decisive. $7.5 million was for punitive damages and $2.5 was compensatory damages. During the trial, Professor Scofield's testimony was harrowing. She spoke about the PTSD and deliberated the debilitating physical pain caused by relentless online harassment. On the other side, Gilliard, who represented herself, tried to claim her statements were protected by spiritual freedom of expression. The judge didn't buy it, calling the actions malicious and fraudulent. It's a landmark moment that sets a serious precedent for how digital creators handle accusations in high-profile cases. And then there was another case that went along with this as well, too. This is another recent one. So moving from the victims of defamation to the families of the fallen. The parents of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Maddie Mogan have officially filed a lawsuit against Washington State University. The core allegation is shocking. The families claim WSU ignored at least 13 formal reports regarding Kohberger's predatory and menacing behavior toward women on campus before the murders occurred. These reports allegedly detailed Kohberger stalking students and looming over desks to the point where security escorts were required for some staff. WSU is indeed fighting back on this, though, requesting a dismissal and denying that they failed in their duty of care. The state has been moved to, this particular case has been moved to the U.S. District Court in Seattle. And the witness list is already 69 people deep. So if you look at this, like, why is it in Seattle? Like, isn't Boise in Idaho? But the case is Washington State University, not University of Idaho. Even though these are really close, this one's going to get settled in Seattle instead. So it looks like it's going over there to the case. So there's with the witness list being 69 people deep, there's former classmates and administrators that were from Kohberger's home state of Pennsylvania that are also going to be in this witness list. This lawsuit asks a difficult question. Could this tragedy have been prevented if the university had acted on those 13 red flags? And then just kind of wrapping this up right here on the broader impact of this whole thing right here. So what we're seeing this week is a shift in the narrative. It's no longer just about the crimes of one individual. It's about the systems and the culture surrounding them, whether it's an unchecked power of social media, the social media investigators, or the responsibility of the university to protect its community. The legal ripples of this case are going to be felt for years. we'll be here. I'm going to keep kind of looking at going back to these. Like I said before, I just, I kind of did a deep dive at the beginning of this to cover the entire case, to go just an overview. I mean, it's huge. There's probably, couldn't possibly, I've tried to listen to all of the stuff on this, but there's a lot of stuff out there. I did not know about Ashley Gilliard and her TikTok stuff, but that's probably not a TikTok guy. So I kind of just go with podcasts and go from there. But yeah, that's where there's a lot of Idaho stuff out there. So if you, hopefully you like it. If not, I mean, you can just wait for other episodes to come out. This is one I probably will continue to cover, though. I'll take a look every week. It's kind of on my list of things to check out once a week to see if there's any updates. Not huge stuff this week. I did mention both of those things last week as well, too, but I kind of did a deep dive as well. So, hey, I hope you're enjoying it. I want to thank you for listening to the D-Lo Show. If you like, go ahead and like, subscribe, follow, and give me that 5-star review to let me know that you are enjoying the show. I hope that you have a great day, and take care out there.